Hello folks, I'm Alex, this is Alex Unabridged, and it's time to have a look at what's top of the trash pile and bottom of the garbage bin for week 2 of GARBAUGUST. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, time to have a little look at what I got through for week 2 of GARBAUGUST, which was category romance and or men's adventure. And I did read a little bit from both categories. I read 4 things actually in total, so this should theoretically be quite a quick wrap up. But then again, it is me, so we'll see. So I've got 4 to go through. From best to worst, from the top of the trash pile to the bottom of the garbage bin. Although I will say this week there is nothing in the actual garbage bin. There was nothing that I thought was bad, poor, that I didn't like. It's all on the trash pile of trashy goodness, just at varying levels. Speaking of varying levels of trashiness, the Trash Pandas are still in effect, my little award that I give to books based on how trashy they are. In case you don't know what these stand for, we've got a bronze Trash Panda, which means just a little bit trashy, a silver, which is good, solid trash, and a gold Trash Panda is for books that are uber trash. So let's dive straight in then with the book that I enjoyed, I think, the most for week 2. And that was the Dante Conspiracy by James Becker. And I gave this a 7.5 out of 10, and this will be a 3.5 stars on Storygraph. And I'm giving this one a bronze Trash Panda. It was a little bit trashy, it had some tropes in it and stuff like that you'd expect. You know, stuff that pushes it into that. It's, you know, it's cashing in on some of the popularity of things like Dan Brown, but it wasn't altogether that trashy, I have to say. This is what you'd kind of expect from the title. It is a crime thriller about a sort of a conspiracy to do with surrounding the poet Dante and sort of, you know, apocrypha and history and rumour and stuff connected to him. So yeah, it's said on the description, good for fans of Dan Brown, and yes, I can see why. It's not as kind of action-packed as something like that. It's a very short book. It was only, I think, about 4.5, 5 hours, if that, maybe even shorter than that. So it is quite a quick listen. So this was part of Audible Plus catalogue. And it doesn't break any new ground in terms of this kind of, you know, sort of historical thriller, you know, kind of mystery type thing. But it does what it sets out to do, I think, and that is entertain and, you know, kind of give you some suspense and some thrills and stuff like that, and some intrigue. And it does that well. Its characters are stock characters, pretty much. You know, they are. But they are recognisable, and they're well done. And there is some grey area there. The characters, you know, even the protagonists, the good guys, aren't completely all good. That, you know, there's questions there to their morality, which is always good to see. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. As I say, it does what it sets out to do, and it does that well. I enjoyed the kind of the puzzle solving nature of it, which I always do if it's something like that, and especially when it's connected to literature. And I enjoyed the kind of the history elements of it, that it weaves the history in quite well with regards to Dante and Dante's life and exile, and like the Medicis, you know, Florence of that kind of period. In that period of history, the sort of the popes that were kind of in office at the time, and yeah, it weaves all of that in alongside this kind of race to, you know, the treasure, find the treasure, find out what the treasure might be and how to find it, and then get there before the other guys. So whether that's before the police which are our kind of two protagonists, Inspector Perini and his loyal sidekick, his sergeant, and then a couple of groups going for whatever this treasure might be. So yeah, it was good. It was fast paced, definitely kept my attention, and yeah, thoroughly enjoyable. Far more so than I thought it would be. I didn't expect it to be bad by any means, but I really enjoyed that. It was a really nice little change from my usual stuff, I think. Okay, then next up, we have got The Whim of Gods, book 1, by Mel R. Bright. This is a science fantasy male monster romance set in a post-apocalyptic America, a post-apocalyptic world, but mainly in America. This I've given a 7 out of 10 to, and another 3.5 stars on Storygraph. And this one also, I think, gets a bronze Trash Panda, possibly just into the silver, but I'm going to keep it at bronze. So yes, this one, this was very enjoyable actually. It was a definitely more of a romance, a sweeter romance than smutty. There is some smut in it. I expected more smut, I have to say, but there was less in there than I expected. It was actually much more about the characters and their kind of growing relationship, and the world as well. And the world building is very good, I have to say, in this. I really enjoyed the world building in this. It's essentially, set quite a few years, 20-something years, I think, after Titans, essentially, have appeared on Earth, usually from under the ground or under the sea. Huge monsters, most of which are kind of from legend. So you do have talk around the world of things like the Kraken, Leviathan, Loch Ness Monster, things like that. Even like a sandworm, similarly out like you'd find in Dune. That kind of huge monster, not necessarily kaiju, but just huge Titan monsters. They've basically destroyed everything. And people are still alive. There is still vestiges of the human race. They're generally kind of in cities or wandering the wastes. But the society is lawless generally. There's a lot of, nasty folks out there, and a lot of slavers, like slave traders, things like that. So it's not a nice world. And we follow our main character, a young fella called Helios, who is in his 20s, who lost his mum when he was kind of a teenager, and he's been basically fighting for survival ever since and travelling around the wastes, to kind of get resources and just, kind of try and stay alive, basically. And he ends up kind of being rescued from some slavers by another sort of half monster. A human who has been experimented on as a child with DNA from one of the Titans, kind of making him half monster, half man. And they essentially travel around together in this wonderful contraption called the Beetle, which is essentially kind of like Hal's Moving Castle. It does say in the description this is a Hal's Moving Castle inspired book. And the Beetle itself, I think, is a great idea. The way that it's set up, the way that, you kind of get to sort of know the interior of it, how it's laid out, what it fit, the atmosphere of it is great. And it has a fantastically grumpy AI called Beat, who runs everything. But it is a giant beetle, basically. It's quite a sweet little story of this, sort of slowly blossoming romance between these two fellas, basically. I think I enjoyed the world building and the storytelling on that side of things more than I did the romance, but that's, it wasn't the romance wasn't bad. It's just I happened to prefer the world side of things in this one. As I say, it wasn't that smutty. It did say in the trigger warnings for the book, non-human genitalia in it, so I expected some kinky sex, but actually it wasn't that kinky. and it wasn't really that non-human, to be honest. It was very close to human. So it's, you know, it is what it is. It wasn't bad by any means. It's just maybe I expected something a bit more. I don't know. I'm not necessarily disappointed, other than the fact that it's can I put it on the bingo board under kinky sex? But it's all right. I've got something else I can fill that with. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very sweet, well written, well thought out little story. Okie dokes. Next up, then we've got The Executioner, number 9, Vegas Vendetta by Don Pendleton. This is, of course, another in the extremely long-running series of The Executioner, where we join Mac Bolan once again on an adventure, on a mission to take down the mafia. I have given this one a 6.5 out of 10 and a 3-star on Storygraph. Yeah, this one, I enjoyed this, but nowhere near as much as the one that I read last year for GARBAUGUST, which was, I forget what it was, Assault on Soho or something like that. It was one set in London, in Soho. And maybe it was because I kind of know London a bit better, and it's kind of got the British connection there and stuff, that I enjoyed that one a lot. It's also got much more bonkers kind of plot. This one was still good, but it didn't quite hold my attention in the same way. But it's got all of the things you'd expect. So this is a gold trash panda without a doubt. It's got, the one-man army, the kind of the disguises, all the casinos and the, bright lights of Vegas. Pendleton does, a decent amount of stuff with that and the kind of Vegas culture, that kind of thing. The mob guys are all written in a very entertaining way. I think it just felt maybe a little bit scattered in its plot at some points for me, and it kind of made me just kind of drop out a little bit and kind of lose focus on it. But it always pulled me back in quite quickly. It was just, I think the pacing was maybe a little bit up and down for me on this. But as I say, it was still very entertaining, still highly, highly trashy. I will still read more of the Executioner series, because that's 2 that I have enjoyed, but would only ever read them for GARBAUGUST. They're not a series I would go back to outside of GARBAUGUST. But yeah, I will dip in and out of it because it's just fun. They are fun books, absolutely fun books. Yep, although it wasn't as good as the previous one that I've read, or as good as the other books that I read this week, it was still a good time. And yeah, as I say, I'd still go back to the series in the future. Okay, and finally, the last thing that I read was an issue of Action Comic from, I think, 1976, which was a boys' adventure comic. And one that was very controversial and ended up kind of dying a death, really, because it caused quite a bit of hoo-ha over its content. It is quite violent for a boys' comic. I think the age group that it was aimed at, it's pretty violent. And yeah, some shops refused to sell it, things like that. So in the end, they had to kind of like censor it themselves a bit, tone it down, and then it wasn't as popular, and it didn't stick around, unfortunately. But I read the very first issue of this digitally. Yeah, this was really good fun. Really nice quick read, as you'd expect. It's a series of comic strips, essentially, and you've got various different sorts of story. So you've got a story about a secret agent who has to stop an assassination attempt on an Arab leader on a plane and stuff like that. Some of the language / description, etc., content within is quite inappropriate these days, but of the time, very much of the time. And then you've got stories about sort of World War II battles, tank battles. You've got footballing stories. You've got a boxing story about a boxer who's losing his sight but wants to kind of become the best, and He's, you know, does he give it up and save his sight, or does he keep going because he's, you know, inspiring the young people in his area. He's a, you know, young black working class lad, and so that was quite an interesting one actually. And then you've got more war stories, U-boats. And then you've got Hookjaw, and this is why I picked this up really. And yeah, Hookjaw the shark. I loved Hookjaw the shark. And I've got a few issues of these because they're all available free online. And I may go back and just read the Hookjaw stories, just the Hookjaw ones, because I really like them. Some of it's in colour, some of it's black and white. But yeah, this is a shark that gets caught by some fishermen, gets the hook stuck in its jaw, and manages to get away after eating one of the fishermen, and then goes and causes some chaos elsewhere at an oil rig, basically. And yeah, it's just highly entertaining, and I really enjoyed that. So yes, as I say, I may go back and read just the Hookjaw comics. But yeah, I haven't rated this because it's just one issue of a magazine. I think, you know, it was good, it was solid, and it was trashy as well. So I think it deserves. I'll give it a solid silver Trash Panda, I would say, for that. But yeah, it's that they are worth a little look at, especially if you've got some nostalgia for that kind of era of boys adventure comics, things like that. So those are the 4 things that I read this week then. So I had a good week this week, as I say, no duffers whatsoever. They were all good. They were all highly enjoyable. So where does that leave us with the bingo board then? The Whim of the Gods, I'm going to use that for Modern Trash, I think, because that was published in 2024. I'm provisionally going to use it for Kinky Sex because it was a little bit kinky. But I do have something else that I've been reading for week 3 that I think I'll probably put into Kinky Sex instead. Then we've got the Dante Conspiracy is going obviously on the conspiracy theory square. And then we've got the action comic, which goes on the moral panic square. And then we've got the Executioner, which ticks off quite a few. I'm pretty pleased with this one. This one will tick off a long-running series, Gangs, Vigilante, and More Than Two Guns on the Cover, which is the big one I wanted it to tick off. So that one has ticked off 4 there. In one go, which is very helpful. So not doing too bad on the bingo board. Still got a few to get, but I've been reading plenty this week. It's quite a big week for sex and or violence. That should fill in quite a few more. So we are getting there. And the Executioner also gives me the 1970s in terms of my decades challenge as well. But I'm going to have to ramp up my reading on the decades stuff. I've not covered that many so far. But the bingo board is going well, so that's the main thing. I am getting there. So that'll do for me today, folks. That was my wrap-up for week 2 of GARBAUGUST. I'll be back next Wednesday with my wrap-up for week 3. So thank you very much for watching, folks. As always, do drop your thoughts in the comments below. It's always lovely to hear from you. I will be back on Friday this week with my thoughts on Who Goes There by John W. Campbell. Which of course is the novella that inspired The Thing, the movie by John Carpenter. So I do hope you'll join me for that then. But from me, for now, stay trashy.